Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 17th of May. We got a lot of very interesting news for today, so let's start. And first of all, I would like to start from the north. We haven't heard any news from the north since the 1st of April, when the Russians decided to regroup and to leave the north. But today we got the news that the Russians, they made an attempt to cross the border in the Sumsky region, and they were trying to establish control over this town on the border, Seredina Buda. The Russians, they attacked toward this town and they were trying to establish control over this town. It's like the result of this day. A few days ago, I got the message and information that the Ukrainians, they moved here their militia. So they can't keep their professional Ukrainian army here, because it's very far in the north from the main battlefield. You see where's the Donbass, where's the main clashes, and where is the north. So of course they didn't have any possibility to move their professional forces. So that's why they was in a very hurry. So that's why they moved their militia. Maybe even more. They prepared the militia from the locals, like at the day before the Russians were planning to strike this area. And today there was a lot of very heavy clashes. As you see, the Russians were bombing this area heavily. As a result, the Russians couldn't take this town. But the main idea that the professional Russian army is fighting in this area with the Ukrainian militia. And I don't have any idea how long this militia can hold this area. Why did the Russians do like that? It's a very interesting question, and I have some explanation to you. First of all, now let's move to the Kharkiv area. The answer to this question is here. First of all, as you know, that the Ukrainians, they had offensive operations toward the Russian border, and they reached the border at some point of the Russian Federation border. More than that, today I got a very interesting news that Ukrainians, they managed to cross the Siversk River near the town Rubizhny. So we can say that this area, some territory on this side of the beach, is now under the Ukrainian control. I can't tell you exactly about the size of this bridgehead, but as I see, this is the bridgehead that Ukrainians managed to establish, to capture, and now they have possibility to cross the soldiers on this side of the river. The Russian sources said that the Ukrainians, they stopped their offensive operation towards the Russian border, so they reached this area, and they're not, according to the Russian sources, they are not planning to continue their offensive operation. The Ukrainian military authority made such decision because of the fact that they need urgently these forces, these professional Ukrainian forces, in Izyum area. So they ordered and they moved a lot of forces from the Kharkiv area towards Izyum. So that's why the Ukrainians, they didn't have more manpower, they didn't have more critical mass to continue this operation. And exactly this time, when the Ukrainians almost reached the border, when the Ukrainians managed to cross the river in this area right in front of the Vovchansk railroad, and as you know, if the Ukrainians are able to cut the supply, they will deal a lot of damage to the Russians' supply. So right in this time, when the Ukrainians were almost reached the border, they crossed the river, the Ukrainian command, they moved a lot of forces from the north of the Kharkiv towards the Izyum area. And when these forces started their movement, exactly at this time, the Russians started their offensive operation on the north of Ukraine, in the Sum area. And this is very bad news for the Ukrainians, because it's a very smart step. You see that Ukrainians, they totally concentrated their forces in Donbass. They're sending there a lot of forces, militia, everything they have. They even send their Kharkiv, one of the most powerful group, towards Donbass as well. And at the same time, the Russians strike on the north with their army, professional army. So we'll see what's next. Now we're moving to the Izyum. And today the Russians, they confirmed one more time that they established control over this town, Drobyshevo. You can see this on this map. They established their star, their flag, and they moved their front line, as you see. And now we can say one more time that this area is under the Russians, so, including Kiarova. So this area and the Stavki is under the Russians. We discussed this yesterday, but it's not important. I want to discuss with you the situation in Izyum. So we need this blue cloud. We discussed this yesterday, but we need this blue cloud for one purpose. Today, the Ukrainians military authorities, they reported that the Russians army number 20 finished their regrouping, and now they're ready, and they started their offensive operations towards Slaviansk. And this army is located here in Izyum. And this regrouping and the finishing of this regrouping ended exactly at the same time when the Russians announced that they established control over Dovginke, this area. We discussed about the edge, about the wedge in this area, that the main goal of the Russians to split this forest into pieces and to move towards Dolina. And from this area, the Russians are moving towards Bogorodishne. And the main idea of the Russians in this area, first of all, and is the main goal, it's like few steps. First step to establish something like first barrier here on the north of this forest, to encircle Ukrainian army near Svetogorsk, to encircle Ukrainian army near Liman, and they have almost completed this mission. Then they are planning to boil this area to reduce the Ukrainian army in this area. After that, their mission to move towards this forest and to establish another front line right on the border of this forest, right on the top of the Slaviansk. So this is the Slaviansk, and the distance between the edge of this forest and the Slaviansk is just 3 kilometers. So we can say that as soon as Russians are able to establish control over this part of the forest, we can say that the north part of Slaviansk will be ruined. The Ukrainians won't be able to save even a building in the north part of the Slaviansk. So this is the plan of the Russians in its like Slaviansk operation, North Slaviansk operation. Of course, they're still moving towards the Barvinkovo and towards this railway road, but there were no updates regarding this. Another important update we got from the Bilogorovka, not an update, but most of the Russians' military sources, they're still saying that there are still heavy clashes, that the Russians are still fighting for this bridgehead. There is no success from both sides. There are a lot of casualties from the both sides, so we'll see what's next. But I won't do any marks here because for now I don't have any information about the area and about the hell that happened there. But important update came today from Severodonetsk area. According to the Ukrainian military report, we know that today, this morning, there were very heavy clashes in the town Sirotine, in this area. So there were no information from both sides about the town Mitolkin, about the town Voronove. The only thing that the Russian announced that yesterday there was an attempt to establish control over this town, but we don't have any information if they did this. But this morning the Ukrainians announced that there was heavy clashes near the town Sirotine. Of course, there are two ways to do this, or from the Voronove, moving from the Voronove, or moving from the Mitolkine, or moving from this forest. Anyway, if they're so deep in the back of Ukrainians, that means that these towns, Mitolkine and Voronove, I think that in a day or in a two, we will receive the news that this town falls. But for now, I'm not planning to update this because I don't have any mentions about that these towns were taken. So if I had at least one mention, if anybody mentioned that these towns were captured, of course I would mark them. But none of the Russian sources told that. And now we are moving to our Zolote, Kamyshovaha, Toshkivka, Girske area. One important thing I want to tell you about the Russian media today. This morning, they announced on their pro-Kremlin TV, the pro-Kremlin channel. It's pro-Kremlin channel. It's a government channel. They announced that the Russian forces managed to encircle around 15,000 of Ukrainian soldiers. It was very shocked news because we are following these maps, we are following the Telegram channels, and nobody saw something like this, because we know that Russians are moving, they're moving very hard, but we didn't saw anything about the encirclement, or there was a collapse and nobody knows about it, or something else. In an hour and two, the Russians updated their news and they removed that news that they established, that they managed to encircle and so on. But the thing is that you see this area is under very heavy fire, and this map, as you see, is updated. And the main idea that yesterday in the evening, few resources told us, said that the Russians established control over Toshkivka. So that's why I will update this map, because we have a few resources that very interesting resources, and people trust these resources, of course, on the Russian side, and they told us and they said that this area was taken by the Russians. So that's why I will remark, because there are a few improvements about this. For example, the Russian sources, they're not confirming this information, they're not saying anything about this. But the thing that they're saying, and it's very important, that the Russians established control over the town Orekhovo. We discussed this town many times, and as you see, the US sources, they updated their map. Yesterday, on this line, this line was on the Ukrainian control. Today, they updated this map, but the Russians said that they established control over Orekhovo. So we can mark this territory as the territory that under the Russian control. So we see the picture, and this picture is not very good for the Ukrainians. And the thing is that you see that these two icons of the weapon, and they are located very, very well, very careful. And it's true, and we discussed it many times, that the main idea of the Russians to move towards this forest, and they're doing this right now from these two directions, from Toshkivka and from Orekhovo. So they want to create some bridgehead in this area, and we know that the Ukrainians on the other side of this road, they have their own fortified area, and this area is very powerful. And of course, as we discussed, the main idea of the Russians to cut this road and to encircle Zolote group. I'm not sure that Zolote has around 15,000 of Ukrainians, but at least 5 or 7 they have. I'm sure about this. Also, there was more news about the fact that the Russians continue the operation from Popasna towards Vrubivka, from Popasna towards Kamyshuvacha, and towards Zolotoye. But again, I won't update this map with the blue clouds, just to show you that their movements, and with the blue clouds, I'm trying to update the territory that, according to the Russian sources, they have already captured. The only thing I want to add and to say that, according to the Russian sources, they managed to take the suburbs of the Kamyshuvacha. And now there are heavy clashes in this area. So it's a very important update. And this is the thing. Now let's talk also about the Toshkivka. I think that they're planning to move towards this road as well. And I see, and according to my understanding of this situation, I think that in a week, maybe by the end of this week, maybe by the Monday, by the Tuesday or Wednesday next week, we're gonna see a cauldron in this area, if Ukrainians won't do anything to prevent this disaster. And what can they do? They need to start the counter-offensive operation from Lysychansk towards Toshkivka, and from Bakhmut towards Popasna. But also more news from Popasna. As we discussed yesterday, the soldiers, the army from this area, they're moving in every direction. They're moving to the south, they're moving to the west, and the west sources map, they update their map. And this update was done according to the Ukrainian military authorities report this morning. And according to that report, the Russians were stopped on the line Pilipchatyne-Viskriva. So the Ukrainians, they have something like a fortified area, and they tried to stop the Russians here. We discussed also all the movements in this area towards Bakhmut, tried to prepare another cauldron in the area of Svetlodarsk, and this is the thing that the Russians are trying to do right now. But let's move back to our Toshkivka. Toshkivka is a very important area. It's a very important area, and the importance of this area is not just about taking Chihirove and moving towards this road and to attack Girsky from the back. The importance of Toshkivka is that this town opens Russian road to the north. Now the Russians are able to move towards Klakolova and Ustinovka and Bilagora. Because until the Russians take Toshkivka, there was a very small tunnel between this area and the river, and of course it was impossible to move along this river to reach the Ustinova, Kolokolova, and Bilagora. So that's why by taking Toshkivka, now they can blockade Ukrainian forces in Chihirova and move to the north with these fields. There is no barriers in this area, native barriers. They can take Klokolova for a day, Ustinova as well. And the main idea, if they are able to move to the north, they can cross this river in this area. Let's take a look at this area. It's a very important territory. So this is Toshkivka. So this is the town which blockade this, the forest. And now they can take these small, I don't know what is this, small town, small buildings. They can take this village, they can take this village, and they can take this village, and they can get this place. And if they are able to get here, you see there's everything is prepared. They can prepare the pontoon bridges and cross this river. And the main idea, of course, in this crossing of this river is there is a forest here, you see. There is Barivske, and the Russians tried to storm Barivske yesterday, and their attempt was failed. But if the Russians move from Toshkivka towards this river, and then they can use this forest as a native defense, as a native barrier for Ukrainians to move to the north, you can see they can reach Lysychansk, and they can attack Barivske with their commanders and with their scout groups from the back. The falling of this small town of Toshkivka opens the big door for the Russians to the north. Toshkivka is one of the most important town in this small village. You see that this distance between the river and Toshkivka, and Ukrainians, they have position there. And of course the Russians, they can't move towards the north. They were under very heavy fire from Toshkivka. But for now, the Russians have opened the door towards the north. And that's not cool for the Ukrainians. That's not cool. Now let's move to the Avdiivka. There are still heavy clashes in the New York. The Russians are trying to take and to move towards New York, towards the north of New York. Still heavy clashes near the Avdiivka. And yesterday we discussed about the counter-offensive operation of Ukrainians in the Gulai Pole area. I told in my previous video that according to the first information I got, that the Russians managed to destroy around 300 tanks, but later this information was updated. Also, I saw some updates in the comments. Around 30 tanks and around 300 of the soldiers were destroyed during this attack. I also published the video in my Telegram channel. Now let's talk about Mariupol. You know that yesterday in my previous video I published that around 51 soldiers surrendered. By this morning of local time, of course, about 300 soldiers surrendered, and more and more Russian sources, they're saying that by this evening of the local time they will receive another soldiers who is planning to surrender. But one important note about this area, about this Azovstal area, there is a very interesting reporter there who works in this area, and he created his own video. He was like on the edge. He was among the soldiers who helped Ukrainians to rescue the wounded Ukrainians, and who was organizing all the process regarding the surrendering process. And he had time to talk with the Ukrainians. So there was like Ukrainians and the Russians, they worked together trying to get the wounded Ukrainians from the Azov bunkers. And he talked with one of the Ukrainians, and these Ukrainians, he told this guy that, you can't even imagine how much of Ukrainians are in the Azovstal. You will be very surprised when you understand how much of Ukrainians are there. I don't know what does it mean. The first feeling that I got when I heard these words, that there are much more than 2,000 of Ukrainians there. There is a very big possibility that there might be around 5,000 or 6,000 of Ukrainians, because as we know that at the beginning of this operation in Azov, in Mariupol, there was around 20,000 of Ukrainian soldiers who defended this area. So we'll see what's next. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel and enjoy your day. Bye bye.